What's good, YouTube? Cardfight King here, AQUA Life Baby. You already know how it is. So today, guys, I'm going to be doing my brother's Dragonic Vanquisher Narukami deck. This deck is long overdue, a few months overdue, rather, I would say. But better late than never, right? So we did get a lot of play testing with the deck, over this amount of time since we completed it really back in February, and we I was able to he hasn't been able to enter into that because this is my brother's deck and his favorite clan or whatever, but I was able to enter a tournament with it during spring break, and I usually tell you guys this in some previous videos before, but testing is great, testing is always amazing, it's good, but testing is more or less a ground for theory crafting, for learning a deck, learning and practicing your plays. When you enter a tournament, that's where you have a chance to apply everything that you have done, all of your practice, all your theory crafting. You get confirmation on a few different things or not, and then it'll really show you what you probably need to change your deck when you start going up against decks you probably might not have, better meta decks like Night Rose and Gear Chronicles and Luard and things like that. So yeah, me entering the tournament with this deck definitely confirmed a few things and opened up my eyes to a lot of things. Disclaimer being that I'll talk more about my tournament experience throughout the video and more at the end, but I will say quick points that the deck is not fast at all. It lacks a lot of burst. It has no real draw. It has no real draw engine, no real advantage engine, and it also relies on a certain grade 1 card to avoid more or less a sluggish start. That the grade 1 card in here really gets the deck rolling, really gets you what you need to do, and it also helps on the defensive turn. And one thing that I've said in a lot of videos when I talked about Narukami is that I believe Thunderstrike is, despite Vanquisher's amazing late game, Thunderstrike is an ability that I think holds the Vanquisher back a bit because it causes the process of you getting to your late game and other abilities to go off to go a lot slower. Thunderstrike is just not that good of a clan mechanic, and I think it's one of those things that's holding this deck back. Where it loses burst, where it loses a lot of different things. But let's get into the deck profile, guys, and I'll explain more of my points as I go along. Alright, so Grade 0 starter Aesthetic Draco Kid. It's a 7k booster at Thunderstrike 1, and when a rear guard is retired during your turn, you can retire this starter, and your opponent chooses a card on his or her field and retire by instant. This is good for getting your first stride off if your opponent maybe threw down a front row or something, or has an additional back row, and you can combo this with your grade 2s if they're trying to play around Vanquishers on stride ability. It's a pretty nice card. Otherwise, I like to keep him to the side and have him be a nice 7k booster, so when we're boosting things like Shatora and Shatora, Rock Climb, and Voltage Horn, they can hit some good numbers. For heal triggers, obviously, can't find it. There it is. 4 heal triggers, 4 Vanquisher crits because we're playing Vanquisher. 3 Malevolent Djinns. The Margle Clone crit comes in handy. Comes in handy a little bit, not too much. You could combine it with a Shatora boosted by a 7k and push that 18k column over to 21. If you need to make numbers, if you're trying to hit certain things, but otherwise, it's just a decent card to have. It's better to have an effect trigger than not. 3 draws and 2 of the stand trigger Vivian. The draws are in there because, again, this deck is slow. This deck needs to be able to get as much advantage as fast as possible without losing some of his power. You just need to be able to. You just want to try and you just want to have the higher chance of trying to hit these cards and get as much cards to your hand as possible, because this deck doesn't have really a draw engine or a search function. And then Vivian I think is a good card, but she could have been a lot better. So what she does is that at GB1, when you retire something on your opponent's board through a card effect like Vanquishers on strike skill, Rock Climb, you can put her on top of your deck, shuffle it, unflip a damage, and draw a card. It's a pretty good card. The best usage of this card I find is that if you see it in your opening hand, try calling it to the field early. If you can if you're not trying to conserve her for guarding. And then when you go into Vanquishers on stride, use that, kill a front row if possible, and then send her back to the deck, shuffle, and get an unflip, making it free. This deck, outside of her and the Perfect Guard, it doesn't have any way of unflipping. So, you do what you can with what you got. All right, on to grade 1. All right, grade 1s for the unflipping Perfect Guards. You need counterblast in this deck badly. For stride neighbors, because you need to be able to stride. Possibly the most important card in your main deck. I would say he's up there in the conversation of probably the most important card in your main deck. Chainbow Dragoon. So what he does is that if you once per turn, when an opponent's rear guard is put into the drop zone through a card effect on your turn. If you have a Vanquisher Vanguard, grade 3 or greater, then you can choose a card. Your opponent chooses a card in their drop zone and binds it face up, and you choose a unit on your board and give it plus 2k. Why is he important? Because he is your engine. This is the card that you want to see early, often on the field. I actually hate riding this card, because you need this card on the board to really set your stuff up. Again, what you want to try and get to is things like Thunderstrike 3, so that Bulwark will have be able to guard for 10k. Thunderstrike 4, so Bulwark can blow up a rested front row. Thunderstrike 5 for VMAX. You want to get there as fast as possible. Also, you want to keep putting cards in the bind zone, so that when you go into a late game Vanquisher Voltage, your front row will be boosted to astronomical numbers. And that's what you really want out of the deck. Again, trying to take this deck into late game as fast as possible by putting cards from our opponent's drop zone to the bind zone. And this definitely helps out against even some of the better decks. Gear Chronicles, definitely Luard, whatchamacallit, Night Rose now. This deck can definitely crap on Night Rose, but I'm going to talk about Night Rose more at the end of the video, because I think there's a little misconception there. But yeah, definitely an important card. And then 2 copies of Trainee Monk Dragon. What he is he's a 9k attacker at Thunderstrike 1. And his other ability is you can put him into the soul and let your Vanquisher Vanguard hit an additional rearguard circle. So he lets you attack another rearguard circle. So if you're on VMAX and you can only hit two cards, throw them into the soul, and then you can attack 3 cards. It just helps you control and clear your opponent's board, more or less. Attack those resist units if you're not on VMAX, and that's not something that you selected to attack. So definitely a nice tech card in here at 2, and it's also 9k attacker on the side. So again, combining him with the starter, it's a solid 16k column, and then you use his ability when you're going after things. All right, and on to grade 2. Alright guys, grade 2 lineup is very linear but very important. 4 copies of Voltage Horn Dragon. This deck needs to be able to retire bind as fast as possible and as often as possible. And Voltage, this whole grade 2 lineup is all about being able to retire bind. Don't have any, you really don't have room for a lot of tech cards and things like that, because this deck is already pretty slow in achieving what it needs to do, and you need to be able to speed that up. So Voltage Horn is just the Amber clone. When you attack a Vanguard and he's boosted, Counterblast 1, your opponent chooses a card on their board, and Retire binds it face up. Again, just getting the engine started. 4 copies of Rock Climb. Same thing as Amber, except same thing as Voltage Horn, except he's the Glimmer Breath clone. On call, Soul Blast 1, Counter Blast 1. He gets plus 2k. Your opponent chooses a unit on their board and Retire binds it. He's same purpose as Voltage Horn. Then when he returns to his 9k, you can either you can use him as an intercept and make room for another one or whatever. So, but again, it's all about speed in that category. And then 4 copies of Chitora. I know this is a different card sleeve. I broke one of them. Don't worry about it. For Chitora provides that same type of advantage that Voltage Horn and Rock Climb do in being able to bind a card instead of retire. He just binds from the drop zone, but he's great early game. He can only attack the Vanguard, but he's an 11k attacker. Good target for the stand trigger, obviously. But if he hits, you CB1, you bind something from your opponent's drop zone, and you get to draw a card. So this guy is definitely a card that you want to make sure you use him wisely. Make sure you set him up in position to succeed. Set him up so that your opponent want to probably take him, so you can at least build some advantage off of his ability. All right, on to grade 3. All right, so grade 3s. Through 2 Crimson and a Vermilion. Now, the reason why I'm running the backup, is because 1, too lazy to find any the Thunderstrike one that on call, retire, bind, the front row, whatever it is, but Blitz Spear, I think his name is. But with this Vanquisher deck, the gist of the Vanquisher deck is you want to be on Vanquisher. Vanquisher is what you really need to be on, and anything else might, will definitely kind of slow down your process. Because if your opponent sees you on Vermilion, then the Vermilion or anything other than Vanquisher, then they're going to have in their mindset that you are going to have the top deck Vanquisher or something like that. And they'll feel more comfortable putting cards in the front row, knowing that your on-stride ability, that you're not going to have an on-stride ability to clear it. So, again, this deck is based around Vanquisher, and you want to be on Vanquisher. And this is just a backup, just in case you're in a situation where, for some reason, late game, you need to Legion. If you're stuck on him, if you're stuck on Crimson, which is what you'll draw into more often than Vermilion. If you're stuck on Crimson, you at least have a Legion play if you can't stride. So that's pretty much why we're running him. And then, last but not least, 4 copies of Vanquisher. GB2, his GB2 ability can be used defensively if you combo that with Bulwark Dragon, but I'll get to when we get to Bulwark, we'll readdress it. But pretty much when something is retired due to one of your card effects, he gets 3k and an extra crit at GB2, and then his on-strike ability is Counterblast 1. Kill something in the front row, retire bind it. So very simple. Leader of the deck is what you want to be on. All right, on to Stride. Stride's fairly simple. Seabreeze, just get Seabreeze out the way. It's a Stride deck. 2 of the Vitra. Thunderstrike 1. Thunderstrike 1, get a plus 5k shield. Thunderstrike 1's not too hard to achieve, obviously. So it's just an easy 5k shield, so I run 2, just the ease of it. We're thinking about probably cutting 1 for a screw. But, that'll be, through more testing. 2 copies of Bulwark Dragon. Bulwark Dragon is a poor man's Denial Griffin, and he's much worse than Denial Griffin, but he can still be useful. So Thunderstrike 3, he gets an extra 10k. So he's nice. So he puts your defense up to 36k when you guard with him at Thunderstrike 3. His other ability is that for every 4 cards in your opponent's bind zone, at the end of the battle that you guarded with him, you get to retire a rested front row unit. Now, why is this kind of bad? Well, 1, you have to be a Thunderstrike 4. 2, it only retires a front row unit. 3, it happens at the end of the battle, meaning that If you use him too early against the Tidal Assault, Magnum Assault, they're just going to restand because turn player gets priority and they're no longer rested. Um, some cards you just get their abilities, just, to go off whatever it is. I mean, it's just that end of the battle text kind of, to me, kind of hurts and slows down this card. If it didn't have end of the battle, then I would say, okay, this card is pretty, it is not half bad, but, you know, depends on how you use it in the situations that you use him in. 4 copies of Voltage. Pretty much your first stride. What you do is you just you when you stride at him, flip a copy up, and if he hits an opponent's Vanguard, you kill a unit, and then choose 2 units. I believe your opponent chooses 2 units. No, your opponent chooses a unit to kill on their board, then you choose 2 units in their drop zone and bind them face up. Pretty good. GB3, your front row gets 3k for every unit in your opponent's binds them face up. So by late game, if your opponent has like 7 cards face up, your front row gets that's ice. That gets 21k power to your front row. It just gets even bigger. So that's why you want to keep retire binding. You want to keep retiring and whatnot. And what I forgot to address with Bulwark is that when you do retire defensively with Bulwark, when you do retire defensively, it will activate Vanquisher's GB 2 ability to get 3k, putting him at 14. And if you have Chain Bolt is an extra 2k, putting him at 16. So it definitely has defensive options in that category. Otherwise, but that's pretty much those guys. 4 copies of Conquest Dragon. A lot of times, again, this deck doesn't really have counterblasting help. It doesn't, you have to be able to mitigate your counterblast pretty well. But if you find yourself in a situation where you need a nice mid-game stride, or you just need something free, Conquest is your boy. He blows up a front row, and then he'll give your front row 5k power for each open front row that your opponent has. But remember, you have to put your unit on the field in the front row that you want to get power prior to you using his act ability, or else they won't receive the power because they receive the power on activation of his ability. So, yeah. And then 3 copies of VMAX. VMAX is definitely a card that has helped this deck just a lot. So pretty much what he does is that you get to, for each face-up copy of a stride unit that has Dragonic Vanquisher in his card name, he gets to attack a front row, or not front row, excuse me, he gets to attack a rearguard circle on your field. So after a Dragonic Vanquisher Voltage stride, you get to attack the Vanguard and 2 rearguard spots, which is pretty nice, having a stride card attack 3 cards. But so, if you use another Voltage, he can attack 4. He can attack the Vanguard in 4 cards. You use more copies of him. You see how that process goes. His other ability is that if your opponent has no cards on their field at the end of his attack, you get to counterblast 2 at Thunderstrike 5 and deal your opponent damage, and damage calculation applies normally. So he can definitely end games. If you find your opponent at 5 damage, you wipe his board. And you have 2 counterblasts. That's a free, easy damage that could just end the game, no matter what they guard, no matter what they do, unless they somehow protect a card in their field. This guy can definitely end games. You don't want to look to use his ability, really, if your opponent's more like at 3 or 4 damage. It's a risk if he's at 4 damage, because you have to take what counterblast you have available to you in that situation. But he's just a good card to go into to clear boards and to set up future plays. Just overall, a very nice card, very needed card for this deck. And it has Dragonic Vanquisher in this card name, which is also a bonus. Now, as far as the tournament went, I really just want to highlight my match against Night Rose. Against Night Rose with this deck, I some people say, yeah, this deck's supposed to destroy Night Rose, and I'm like, well, yeah, because it retired by some drop zone, and what does Night Rose use the drop zone? But Night Rose, one, you obviously play multiple copies of cards in your deck. Two, um, Night Rose has such good burst that they can just burst you down, then hollow and retire their cards off the board. So you can't use Dragonic Vanquishers on stride skill, which would then require you to have a number of things happen for you. You want to be able to catch them slipping by having Negro Bone on the field or not hollowing cards on the field. If you catch but again, it's going to also rely on what you draw into. You're going to rely on drawing into Rock Climb and Voltorn. Those two cards are what's going to set the tone for that match, as well as Chainbow Dragoon. Chainbow Dragoon is possibly the single most important card in this matchup, because when you get to if you are able to hit with voltage, if you can get your Rock Climbs and your Voltorns, Chainbow Dragoon will bind an additional card from their drop zone, meaning that they're going to be filling up their drop zone, and you're going to be able to keep binding cards out there, forcing them to probably go into more utility cards to fill their drop zone up again, or use more of their mill effects. Because once a Night Rose player, and I do play Night Rose, so from what I've learned, once my drop zone is more or less set up for how I want it to be, then you limit yourself on the amount of mill effects and anything like that, and just try to go for more reanimation, resurrection abilities, and burst to push that game, going into like Gouch or like Negro Songer and things like that. So definitely in this matchup, Night Rose is a hard matchup because you're going to get bursted down. Night Rose is a much faster deck. But if you're able to survive, get your units that you need to control the board, take Night Rose in the late game. If you can take Night Rose into late game with this deck, you definitely have a much better chance of winning against it, because you'll survive through a lot of the burst turns, and then you're gonna start showing them that powerful late game voltage, VMAX, things like that. So definitely a interesting matchup that they're going to try to win early, but you need to make them go in the late game. Against a lot of other decks, it doesn't really do too well against anyways. Same concept applies with this deck versus Luard. But against some of the other tier 2 rogue decks, it's kind of a 50-50 thing. Great Nature pretty much can stomp this deck into the ground. I've had personal experience with that. They get rid of their own units for you, so you can't really do much about it. Nova Grapplers look to just finish you off on the first stride turn. They have a lot of burst. Aqua Force, Thavas has a lot of resist and a lot of ways to, even Aqua Force has ways to just, burst you, kill you down. Wailing Thavas, getting rid of your advantage on your board when you can't really build an advantage. Melania, just, sticking Melania in the front row and, forcing you to go into VMAX in order to just get rid of her, or force your rear guards to attack her, is something that can definitely slow down VMAX. So, this deck is rightfully in, mid tier 2, where it's at. This deck definitely needs a lot of help, but if you play your cards right, you can catch people slipping and get one over on these, more or less top tier-ish decks. So that's about it, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it's 23 minutes, but I like to explain my joints. I will have some more discussion videos soon. Probably I'm gonna start doing some more. I'm gonna start doing analysis videos of different the different BWCs I'm able to collect information on from around the world. So yeah. All right, Cardfight King, I'm out. Peace.